Well, I'm here today with Tim Wildsmith, pastor, writer, musician, and I have here his YouTube channel. And this is a point of similarity between you and I, Tim. We both have a YouTube channel as well as the same first name. So
that's right.
We got a lot going for us. It's really good.
I knew I liked you.
Yes, I know. I like you too. I have to say, I really do love your channel.
Oh, thanks, man.
I encourage people to check out Tim Wildsmith's YouTube channel. What would you say is a good description of who you are?
Wow. You went like deeply existential on me right here at the top.
Yes. Yeah. I want you to go real existential, start from your child. No, just,
sure. Yeah.
How would
you
describe yourself a little bit?
It's funny that you've got the YouTube channel pulled up, because even like writing pastor, writer, musician that's one of those things. I don't know what I'm an Enneagram 4, and I'm so sure people can I'm an emotional feeler, and INFJ, and it's like to even pick out 3 words to try to describe myself just as a generic description for a YouTube channel is like something that stresses me out to the max. But
I know what you mean.
Yeah, my background is as a musician. I went to Belmont University and got a degree in music business. And while I was there, I started leading worship for a local youth group that's here in Nashville, Tennessee area. And my youth pastor hired me out of college back in Omaha, Nebraska, which is where I grew up mostly. We kind of bounced around a little bit when I was a kid, but Omaha, Nebraska was kind of home base for my dad's corporate career. And so I moved back to Nebraska, and for about a decade, I was a worship leader, and I kind of did some singer-songwriter stuff, made some albums, mostly all based in Omaha, Nebraska. And then my wife, Becca, and we dated at Belmont, and like one of her favorite things to say is that I was very stupid and I broke up with her when I moved back to Nebraska. And so we were apart for 6 or 7 years, but then we reconnected, and I decided to move back down here, and we got married. And I was still doing worship leading and music, but I also had some connections in the music industry and started working there. So this was like 2011, 12, 13. And then worship leading at a local church here turned into an opportunity to help out with youth ministry. And in 2014, I kind of went into youth ministry full time, and did that for several years. During that time, I decided to go to seminary. So I'm just kind of tracking you through kind of the last 10 years. So I went to seminary in 2016, Fuller Theological Seminary. And back in 2019, I left the church that I was at and just went full time to finish seminary. So I finished seminary in June of 2020. I got an MDiv at Fuller, and one of my professors there had recommended me for it's called a postgraduate fellowship. So my wife and I went to England for a few months last fall in the midst of this pandemic. It was pretty wild, and I got to study at Oxford at Wycliffe Hall, which is like the evangelical college at the University of Oxford, studying with N.T. Wright and things like that. It was a really, really cool experience. And so along the way, I started this YouTube channel as kind of a place I've had it for a long time for like music and things like that, but didn't really use it very much. And then I started having some like preaching videos and youth ministry stuff. And then during the pandemic, I bought a couple Bibles kind of as graduation presents to myself. And I was watching your video reviews and David Lee Brown and Bo Tate and Randy Brown. I was watching all these people do Bible reviews, and I was like, I'm going to make one of these for fun. And it was like, I loved it. I had such a fun time doing it, and people responded. And that's how I kind of created Bible Review Blog, which is, now a website and social media and this YouTube channel. And mostly what I'm doing is Bible reviews, but also some other content creation. And I'm working on some new stuff right now. So yeah, pastor, writer, musician, Bible reviewer, kind of jack of all trades, master of none. But that's kind of how I got here.
That's really good overview, and great for people to hear that who maybe watch my channel but haven't seen your channel. I will leave a link to Tim Wildsmith's YouTube channel in the link description, in the video description below this video.
Thanks, Tim.
And I have to say, your videos are just beautifully produced. You have such a gift, and I know we were writing back and forth a little bit, talking about things we like about each other. And I love the gifting that God gives people. And you just have that ability to to do beautiful work. I think, your videos
Thanks.
just look so professional, and I'm sure it's the gifting God has given you, and you've also honed those skills being a musician.
Definitely.
Someone who's very creative, obviously.
I've always had that creative kind of, as a kid, I was doing musical theater productions and,
Okay.
creating little movies. Like our youth pastor, the same guy that hired me out of college back in high school, whenever we had this was pre-internet. So like if we had to promote a fall retreat or a summer camp or something, me and my friends would grab somebody's video camera and we would go make these little mini movies. And we'd record them down to VHS and take them to the youth group. And that's how we promoted that's stuff I've been doing for a long time. And as I've shared with you prior to recording this, I've got all this gear now that I've slowly acquired over the last year. And I'm a little overwhelmed by all. If you could see my office, I have stuff everywhere and I'm learning how to use things and trying to make it look good. But yeah, I feel like, spending a little bit of extra time and investment to make things look good is cool for, it makes sense for YouTube, because if something looks good and feels good, people want to watch it. And my whole goal is to help people with Bible Review Blog is to help people find a Bible that they're going to love and enjoy using. And a lot of times it's hard to do that when you can't see a really good quality version of it. So that's the whole goal with that.
Yeah, well, you're right. It does make the video watching experience very enjoyable. And I think these are subconscious things. We don't always consciously think about how something looks, but it does affect us when we're watching something. And but it takes ability too. I was actually saying to Tim a little earlier before we really got started that I noticed his video there looks nice warm tones, and my tones here look kind of cold, but it's pretty fitting. I'm just gonna say to the audience, you're in Nashville, right?
Yes,
is that
I'm
right?
in Nashville.
And I'm up in New Hampshire. So it is cold up here, is all I can say. We're trying. We're trying to get to warmer weather. We really are. I
won't tell you that it's 75 degrees and sunny today. Actually, well, I guess I did tell you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. So that's okay. That's okay. We're surviving up here. I think you mentioned this and I showed it a little bit, but you do actually have a written review blog for those who prefer written Bible reviews. And I want to actually talk a little bit here about Bibles, Bible reviewing. I think that's a great topic, obviously something we're both interested in. So when it comes to Bibles that you've been reviewing, how did you actually, you talked a little bit about it, so I guess you've kind of answered this, but you got into Bible reviewing about how long ago, and kind of what got you into the whole thing?
Yeah, so I started in April of 2020. That's when I did my first review. It was actually I have show and tell, Tim. It was the ESV. This is the single column personal size Bible, the Heirloom. So it's this little Bible. And I had not really known about premium Bibles prior to a couple years ago. A buddy of mine was leaving our church staff, and we decided to buy him a gift, and we got him an ESV Heirloom Study Bible, which, for those of your audience who don't know, the Heirloom collection from Crossway is like premium goatskin bindings, really great paper, like next level, beautiful Bibles, very expensive. And as any good friend would do, before we gave it to him, I opened it and I looked at it. I opened the box, unwrapped it. I wanted to check it out. I was like, oh, this is nice. And a couple of years before that, I had been with a buddy who at seminary studying at Fuller. I did a hybrid system where I lived in Nashville, but I had to go out to California a few different times. And he had this Bible. It looks the same probably, but this is like a brown lambskin Bible that he had, the personal reference edition. And I saw that a couple of years before. It was another really nice, cool Bible. And so last spring, I was thinking, I'm going to buy myself a really nice premium small Bible similar to the one my friend had, but similar to the study Bible we got from my buddy. And I just started looking out there and I found this ESV personal reference edition, and I ordered it, and it was like a pre-order, and it showed up really early. And I was like, oh, this is cool. This is not what I was expecting. It was not exactly the same Bible that I thought I was getting. I was a little confused because I just didn't know anything about Bibles, premium Bibles in particular. And so I recorded a little review of it because I didn't see anything out there on it. I couldn't find anything about this Bible anywhere. And it like quickly got a lot of views. And it was one of the first of Crossways Bibles that they had moved production from the Netherlands to China, and people were going crazy about that. There was a lot of negative comments on I was like, what did I do? I was like overwhelmed. I was like, I didn't know what I did. So that's kind of what got me into it. I did that review, and then I bought a couple other Bibles just to check them out. I made some more videos, and after about 3 or 4 weeks, I was like, I should give this a name. That's when I named it Bible Review Blog. When I started writing reviews, because I thought I could write better than I could do videos. And so I wanted to put down some words with it. And so, yeah, that was kind of, it was all April, May last year, 2020. And also the pandemic had just started. So I was at home, I was bored. I was finishing up grad school, but I was not that busy. And so I was just, ordering Bibles on the internet. And then I found all the Facebook groups and started trading Bibles with people. And I spent like 2 or 3 months where I was doing a little bit of homework and a lot of scouring the internet for Bibles.
Well, it's a nice kind of escape thing to do, but
Yeah.
it has a good, it has kind of an edifying aspect to it. There's definitely worse things we could be addicted to,
Exactly.
as a lot of the Bible collectors say. But I have to say, what I've always loved really nice Bibles, and I remember as a 9-year-old, I won a Sunday school contest. Or a children's church contest. And my children's church leaders took me to a bookstore, Christian bookstore, and let me pick out a Bible. And that was my first, like, really nice Bible. I still have it. It's not in good condition anymore, from 1988. So that already showed like I had this inclination. I think there are signs that you're going to be someone who's into this even at a young age.
Sure.
And I liked nice Bibles even then. But I got a, 2005 for Christmas, I got a calfskin, what do they call it? It's the Nelson Signature Series.
Okay.
And, at the time, I just wanted a nice Bible. And if you're following the reviews now and people on Facebook, these Bibles now, they're a hot item. People will pay a lot of money for a Bible like that. If I had known, I told that to Bo, I would have bought more than one, because then I could sell another one now for like $500. So
it's wild, isn't it? Sometimes I see people, and it feels a little bit dirty for somebody to sell a Bible for that much, but people buy them all the time. It's wild. Well,
it's a form of collecting.
Yes. Yeah.
And the truth is, I guess there's a balance in it. We want to be careful. And obviously we don't want to be idolatrous in anything, but if you were to have a Bible, let's say a Gutenberg Bible, that's not going to be a low price for a Bible like that. It's rare. Yeah. So anything that's rare is going to have value to a certain segment of people.
Absolutely.
So I think we should talk a little bit, because we both get to handle a lot of different Bibles. Yeah. What are the things that really stick out to you and are things that just draw you to a copy of the Bible? Something that when you're looking at it, you're like, these are the things I really tend to like and look for in a Bible.
That's a great question. I think a lot of people get really excited about what's on the outside. A great goatskin Bible with a really soft cover, or just a really smooth texture, or whatever you like about it, and just the design of it and the aesthetic quality, that really draws you in. And I do think that it's nice to have a Bible that is nice enough that you want to pick it up. That's what I tell people is one of the good things about premium Bibles is that they're the kind of thing that you want to hold in your hands because they feel great and they look great. But for me, I think the primary thing I'm looking for is the interior layout, and it being a Bible that's enjoyable to read, because that's what you're going to do with it. And so, and for me, that can be that. I'm not looking for a specific typesetting or layout. I'm just, when I open it up, I want to go, oh, this draws me in. This makes me want to read it. This is easy to read. It's comfortable to read. A lot of people ask me about font size. That's like the biggest question I get from people. And there are certain Bibles out there that the font is really big and you would think, oh, that makes it easier to read, but it's actually a little too big for me because it looks huge on the page and it's a little uncomfortable to my eye. And as you noted earlier, like I have kind of a love of things that look nice and are done well and have great design. And so I like when there's little subtle touches on the page, the way that they're spaced out or where they put the cross references or, headings and things like that. I pay attention to things like that. And I find myself drawn to Bibles that are just subtle and nice, but very, very easy to read and kind of have all the features. But then also, like, I have different Bibles for if I just want to sit down and read. When I study a book of the Bible, one of the first things I do is sit down and read the entire book straight through. And so for that, I often like a single column, a reader format that doesn't have lots of headings and things like that. So you can just immerse yourself in it. But then after that, when I do a deep dive and I'm studying verses and chapters, I like to have a reference Bible that has cross references in it and textual footnotes and things like that. Probably leaning towards like a 2-column format where I'm kind of just zoning in a little bit. So, but yeah, I talk about the aesthetic exterior quality of how it looks and feels, the construction of it. That's also important, is like making sure that it's going to hold up over time if you use it. And then that interior layout. I like to have different translations. So that's another thing that I can kind of give my wife an excuse for buying more Bibles if they're in different translations. And I do use them. So yeah, those are kind of the things that I look for. And in general, I had a little flub there.
Yeah, your brain was thinking genuine leather, maybe,
that's right,
talking about Bibles.
in general, I really like premium Bibles that have nice covers on them. I'm kind of drawn to those just because they're nice. But I also have some pretty cheap Bibles lying around that I use all the time. And one of the benefits, as you said, about doing Bible reviews and getting to see a lot of different stuff is you realize some stuff's just really cool and unique, and it doesn't have to be ultra expensive and like handmade, the finest materials for it to be a really great practical Bible to use on a regular basis.
Yeah, that Art of Life Bible, I think we both looked at that now. What a unique production of the Bible that isn't really expensive, but just beautifully produced and so visually appealing. And yeah, I'm not artistic, so I just admire that stuff.
I'm convinced, and I've said this in several of my reviews of the ESV, the English Standard Version Bibles. The company that publishes them is called Crossway. That Bible's only been around since 2001. And I would argue that next to the NIV and the KJV, it's probably the most popular Bible translation out there. And I'm convinced that one of the reasons that it's so popular is simply because Crossway makes a zillion different Bibles with lots of different cover options, there's literally something for everyone. And they're constantly putting new stuff out. And so I think they've just flooded the Bible market with different options for people. And it gives you, if you're looking for a journaling Bible, if you're looking for anything you're looking for, they probably have one on their website, and they have it in a variety of different bindings. And I think that's one of the reasons why that translation is so popular, is just because there's so many of them out there to choose from.
Mm-hmm. I almost did a video this week. I decided not to. I don't know if I will, but it was basically on that theme. We look at Bible sales for translations, and we tend to just think of it in terms of, okay, if the NIV is number one, then that's because the NIV is the number one translation. But one of the things we forget is, what are the editions of these different translations? Yeah. And so the ESV, I was looking at that. One of the highest selling ESVs is the Esv Study Bible.
Yep.
And for good reason. It's a great Bible.
Yep.
And that's actually, you're right. I think driving a lot of the sales for the ESV would be that edition, as well as you said, they have a lot of other really nice editions of the ESV. No doubt about it. So I wanted to ask you, what would you say? And I know it's a really hard question to answer, but there's no right answer. It's just an opinion. Maybe like you would say, just what's like the nicest Bible to you? Like, what would you say is like, if I just had to...
One single Bible, or like a manufacturer, or what would you say?
Well, I was thinking like if there's a Bible that you could think of that just for you is, but it could be a manufacturer if you want to keep it a little
I'm trying
broader.
To think. I've got a shelf back there with a bunch
It's
of
hard to decide, isn't it? There's a lot of nice ones.
So I would say that the publisher that has kind of surprised me the most, I like them more than I thought I would, is R.L. Allen, which is a company from England that has been around for a long time. They started in Scotland, and I started using the New Revised Standard Version when I was at Fuller. It was one of like the approved translations for the seminary, because it's considered more of an academic ecumenical translation. And so in that academic ecumenical environment, that's one of the translations they use. And so I got my hands on, it's actually sitting right here on my desk. This is the NRSV 1, which is what they call it, from R.L. Allen. And it has this really gorgeous, can you see this? These speckled page edges. And it's a text block from the UK, from, I think it's from Collins. No, it's from SPCK, which is a publisher in the UK. And it's a really beautiful 2-column, center column, very traditional look and feel. But this is, I had to decide when we went to England last fall. We lived there for 3 months at the end of the year. And I had to decide, I actually, all of my video reviews from like October through December were all recorded back in September, because I recorded everything so I didn't have to take Bibles with me to England. And this is the only Bible that I took with me to England. And it was kind of the one that I thought would work really well for me studying in Oxford, but also I really loved it. And I thought, it's premium, it's nice, it's made of goatskin, but it's also pretty durable and it feels rugged. And multiple times while I was studying at Oxford, people would ask to borrow a Bible for something, and I would pull this out of my bag and hand it to them, and they would be like, "Oh my gosh, this is incredible." So it's definitely probably my 1A. It's my everyday Bible right now. Really beautifully. I kind of geek out. I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but one time somebody had to read from it, and they were standing there, and N.T. Wright was looking over their shoulder, flipping through my Bible. And I was like, N.T. Wright just touched my Bible. I don't know. That's
when
funny.
You know it's a good Bible. Like right? It must have some special quality to it if a scholar like him is looking at it.
We had these Monday morning lectures from N.T. Wright. He taught through the book of Philippians for 9 weeks. And I walked up to him one morning and introduced myself as the guy from America who was there. And he was like meeting one of your heroes, and he was so kind and so warm, and he gave me his email address. And so I sent him an email one day and just asking about Bible translations. And he and I went back and forth for a few days chatting about different translations and Bibles. And he's kind of on the record as not really being a fan of the NIV. And he gave me the whole backstory to why that was. And he pointed me to some things he's written in the past about different translations. And I started reading all that. It was really interesting. But this Bible was kind of an entry point to that. So it was really fun.
So that is so interesting in the experiences you had. And I do want to talk about England, but let's just quickly sidetrack a little bit into what you said there about Bible translation. Mm-hmm. So I know we could do a whole video on what does N.T. Wright say about Bible translation. Yes. But I am curious, like, just does he have a philosophy of Bible? Like, does he kind of come down on that spectrum of literal versus more dynamic, would you say?
I think, I don't want to speak for him. I don't know him that well. I think he comes down on the side of the Greek. When he was teaching from Philippians on Monday mornings, he had the NRSV there, but I'm almost positive that he was reading to us directly from the Greek. And, he has a translation of the entire New Testament that he did. But yeah, one of the things I asked him about was he talks about little, like his frustration with the NIV is the way they render one or two words in Paul's writings. And a lot of people would probably read the difference and go, I don't even notice a difference between that translation. But for him, it's like a real theological sticking point to make sure that it gives people, not that it necessarily doesn't open things up for people, that it might close certain readings down. So yeah, I think that he's definitely, I was overwhelmed by his knowledge of Greek. And even though I took Greek in seminary, it was like, because now we have all these softwares and tools that you can use and online reference points, you just have a crutch that you could lean on as opposed to really digging in. And so, yeah, I think that he's a fan of the NRSV in general, not a fan, but he kind of seems to lean towards that as an English translation. But even at Oxford, their approved Bible translations is, several different ones, including the NIV that you can use for your papers and your resources there. Because I often think about Bible translations like this. There's so many different ones, and there's some differences on that scale of word for word versus thought for thought. But like, well over 95% of them are very, very similar to one another, you know? So, yeah, I've enjoyed getting to know more about Bible translation since I started Bible Review Blog. And there's definitely some very passionate people out there who are for one translation or another. But in my personal process of reading the Bible, this NRSV is kind of my everyday Bible, but then I refer to several other translations as I go to just kind of note the differences and do a little bit of background on how the translations vary, you know?
Mm. It is a good problem to have that we
Yeah,
have so many
absolutely.
translations to choose from. And I think we forget this as Americans. We get so opinionated. That's one of the things I've noticed in life is like the more you have, a lot of times the more you take it for granted. And sometimes
Absolutely.
you could just become so nearsighted about things. I will say on the issue of Bible translation, you know, I talked about it, but a very eye-opening thing is I helped get some Bibles to people in some towns in Kenya.
Wow.
And they've, you know, this is the first Bible. And actually one of the groups, they didn't even each get a Bible. They're sharing them because they have such a big Bible study that they're sharing between 2 and 3 people to one Bible. And that's all they have. And they're not picky about, well, which of the 50 translations should I choose from? They're just like, I have a Bible.
I have a Bible. Yeah. We, my wife and I had this really incredible opportunity in the fall of 2019. We went to basically a weekend fundraiser for, it was an organization called Illuminations. And Illuminations is basically an umbrella that represents like the 10 largest Bible translation societies that are translating the Bible into new languages. And their goal is to get a new translation of the Bible, a translation of the Bible in every language that doesn't have one. And so we went to this like weekend fundraiser event style thing with some friends of ours, and it was pre-COVID. So we were just hanging out with these people from all over the world who had come in for this thing, and they were raising money for this project, but they were also sharing about it. And we heard stories from around the globe of people who were translating the Bible, who were reading the Bible for the first time. And it was one of the most moving, beautiful 3 days of my life to hear about how the Bible is being made available to people around the globe who've never had it before, and the incredible work that's being done and the sacrifices that are being made to see that happen. So you're right. When it's like, I have this wide variety of options of Bibles in English and all these premium covers and things like that, it really puts it into perspective.
That's so great. And speaking of different parts of the world, let's steer the conversation to England.
Nice segue, Tim.
Yeah, I like to do that.
You're like one of the Jimmys, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah, right.
Tim Frisch.
Yeah, I don't quite have that Tonight Show name. I don't know. At least it's a good punny name. You know, I get that Frisch Perspective. You know,
that's right. I love it.
There. Yeah, thank you. All right, so England. I'm curious what that was like. One of my questions is, did you get to drive at all while you were over there?
I have driven in England once before.
Okay.
My wife's family did a really big like family trip about 8 or 9 years ago, and we all went to England and we got to drive around a little bit because we rented cars. So as I shared, I got accepted to be it's called a visiting scholar at the University of Oxford. And it's kind of the coolest thing in the world because I was not like getting a degree from Oxford. I got to go and participate and go to class and go to lectures and use the library, but I didn't have to write papers or take tests or it was fantastic. Now we were there during COVID, and so there was some limitations and things like that. But we got on a bus from the airport at London Heathrow and took an 1.5-hour journey up to Oxford. We had to do 2 weeks of quarantine when we got there before class started. We had like rented a little house there that was on the outskirts of town, but then pretty much we just walked everywhere. There was buses in town, but we walked everywhere. And then when we went on little day trips to London or to Cambridge, I went and visited the folks at Cambridge Bibles. We were about a mile from the train station. So we would walk to the train station and hop on a train. You can get all over the country like that. So we literally never had a need for a car we were there for almost 3 months. And there were a couple of things that we were planning to go drive further out into the countryside to do. but there were so many limitations with their national lockdowns and hybrid lockdowns that it didn't make sense for us to go do that while we were there. So, but yeah, the one time a few years ago when I drove on the other side of the road, you're not only on the other side of the road, Tim, you're on the other side of the car. You're driving on it, and it's like your mailman. You know how your mailman's on, it throws everything off. You know, I was constantly feeling like I was going to run into something.
And I've heard, and you can confirm whether it's true or not, but I've heard that they tend to use cars that are more manual transmissions. Was yours a manual transmission?
When we did it a few years ago, it was not. And I'm not good on a manual transmission with my right hand in the US. So imagine going to the left hand. The other thing about being in England is you don't realize this. And I was a pedestrian for 3 months. I was constantly, they teach you look left, right, left when you're a kid in the United States. That's not how it works in England. I was like, I almost got run over by cars or buses multiple times. And after a few weeks, I got used to it. But it was like those first few weeks of just walking around the city, you constantly feel like you're taking your life in your hands every time you cross the road. I mean, it's wild.
That's interesting. I have to say, in the town I live in, sometimes it's that way. Even though I live in a pretty small town, it's big enough. We have 13,000 people here, and if you got to be careful. But I'm sure in a big city like that, I've been to New York City and other cities, and New York City is interesting because there are so many pedestrians there, and the way that it kind of functions there, as you probably know, is pedestrians often just walk out in front of the vehicles. Yeah. So there's kind of this just understood thing between the taxis and the pedestrians that, they kind of watch out for each other. They don't really.
I was gonna say, my wife, Becca, is a rule follower. And and she will stand even if there's no cars anywhere within sight, she will stand at a crosswalk and wait for it to say go. And I'm the guy who, like, as soon as I see an opening, I go across the street. So I can't, we visit New York a little bit, and I can't tell you how many times I've been on one side of the street and she didn't follow me. And I'm like, come on, let's go. I'm a little bit of an adventurer, I guess.
It makes me think of, I think it's the Back to the Future line at the end of the movie, where we're going, there are no rules.
We don't need
and that's
roads.
What it's, okay. There are no roads. That's kind of what it's like in New York. It's like, it's just, They kind of do their own thing.
Absolutely.
So I'm not surprised that you were able to get around a lot through train and everything. Another thing that is very stereotypical of England that I think of is tea. Yes. So a lot of tea over there. Did you drink tea?
A lot of tea and biscuits. What they call biscuits are little cookies. They're called digestives, these little cookies that have chocolate covering on them. We got into tea, and we've brought the tea bug home. So I would say 2 or 3 afternoons a week, we have tea mid-afternoon. And one of the fun things was getting to go have tea with people and meet new people that were studying there with me or that we met around town and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely a fun tradition for sure. And then there's a lot of tea rooms where you can go and grab some really great tea and amazing, pastries and things like that. So I gained a few pounds while I was there for sure.
Yeah. Well, that sounds awesome. And I know that the English are big into their tea. I knew someone recently actually who lives in our area that's from England. And she said, you need to go to this place, this store around here, because they actually have tea that they sell in England, and this is where you get it. So, believe it or not, and it's at the most unexpected place. It's a place called Ocean State Job Lot, I think is what it is, and it's just like one of those stores. Maybe you've heard of Big Lots, those kinds of places, and they just get items from all over the place. And they happen to carry what they call Taifu tea.
Taifu tea. I'll check it out.
I think that's the brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. So when you talk to someone from England, I mean, tea is it's a pretty common subject.
tea and football.
And football. Not our football.
I bought a little internet TV sports package. I did it because I wanted to watch the Masters because the golf tournament was in November. But then I started watching soccer, and people around Wycliffe Hall is the college that I was studying at. They were like, lobbying me to become a fan of their, my friend Joe, he's a big fan of a team called Leicester City. And I was kind of like had my eye on, rooting for somebody like, Manchester United or Chelsea, one of the big teams. He was like, no, go with Leicester. People were lobbying me to be a fan of their teams before I left. So
that is cool. That is a great cultural experience. When you come to the States, we have our sports and affinities and stuff. And as you probably know, I'm kind of into baseball and I collect hats. I don't know if you've seen that, but I've actually been collecting hats from people who watch my channel. They send me a hat and I send them a copy of my book.
That's awesome.
And that kind of connects me with people that I'm, interacting with through my channel all over the country. That's and really cool. Also is building my MLB hat collection, which I really like.
I've been to a few baseball stadiums over the years, and I did a thing where I was getting one of those like authentic hats, but then I stopped because they're like $35.
Yeah. Well, that's why you have a YouTube channel and ask people to give you a hat.
I love it. That's perfect. That's perfect.
But anyway, back to England. Another thing I have to say, and I'm sure a lot of people out there, like certain things about England, but one thing I really do like is British comedy. Yeah. And I don't know if you've watched any of their stuff, but of course I think of like Mr. Bean would be one example of something that my family really likes. I still like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So British comedy. And I think part of it is, they have just a very serious way that they portray themselves, even in their comedy, and yet they're not serious. And that's what's so funny.
We noticed we had the house we were renting had like a little like cable package of some sort. And we noticed that like for every one comedy, there was like 4 or 5 like murder mystery shows, like really intense dramas. And it's like, that seems to be their bread and butter, is the really intense stuff,
Yeah. And my mom read Agatha Christie, and it still does. And my wife likes English murder mysteries specifically, she told me, because it's kind of funny, but she likes them because she likes mysteries. But if they're set in America and they're talking about intense topics, it can make her kind of scared. Yeah. But when it's English,
it's like somewhere else.
It makes it seem more like fantasy, I guess.
My wife read a couple of those. She read a couple of like Oxford themed murder mysteries while she would be reading these novels, and she'd be like, we'd be walking through town and she'd be like, oh, I know what that is. And she'd tell me all about it from these books that she was reading. It was fantastic. She also read a book about C.S. Lewis. It was about his wife, and it was called Becoming Mrs. Lewis. And she discovered that their home was like 3 miles down the road from us. So one day we drove out there and we went and visited his family home, and like it's like a nature preserve now, but it's this big piece of property that was like part of the inspiration for Narnia. And then we went to see his gravesite at the church that he attended. And we got to go inside and see the pew that was like, Mr. Lewis's pew. It was really neat. And it was all because my wife was just reading a bunch of books about Oxford while we were there.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you went into that house, did you look for a wardrobe?
I did. It's funny. There's so many different things around town that you walk by every day. And then like Becca would say, hey, that lantern that we walk by all the time. I was like, what are you talking about? And we got to this one lantern in the middle of the city. And when you turn and look at the door next to it, there's a carving in the door that looks like Mr. Tumnus. And it was that lamppost. And that was part of, he walked by it every day on his way to class when he was teaching at Magdalen College. And he it was kind of part of his inspiration for the book. And you're like, oh, this is so cool to see this stuff. It was really neat.
So one other thing about England, I'm curious your perception of it is how would you describe the spiritual and really the church scene there versus like where you live? And I know where you live is different
Bible
than where
Belt.
I live but.
So I didn't know exactly what I was getting myself into when I went there. So Wycliffe Hall is it's called a permanent private hall. It's basically one of the colleges. There's 30 some odd colleges at Oxford that are kind of all under the University of Oxford banner. And several of them are these permanent private halls that have one foot in the Oxford University world and one foot in a religious world. And so Wycliffe Hall is the Church of England college at Oxford. So most of the students, I would say 80 to 90% of the students that I was there with were being trained they were in ordination training for the Church of England. So they were going to become vicars or priests or whatever. And so I knew Church of England as what I would call Anglican, but then you think about the Anglican Church in the U.S. or the Episcopal Church in the U.S. And what I found is that the Church of England is a much more kind of middle of the road evangelical version of Anglicanism than it is in the United States. So a lot of the Church of England churches we went to or visited or the friends that we met, I think their churches probably resemble more of what we would consider in the U.S. like the evangelical bubble of churches. But the rhythm of their worship is very liturgical, and they use the Book of Common Prayer. So it's like a cross between, I've been in like the Baptist world and the evangelical free world and the non-denominational world in the U.S. It's like a cross between that and more traditional Anglicanism. So I found that really interesting. And I'm someone who has really loved including liturgy and rhythm into my worship practices over the years. And so it was really cool for me because a strong focus on Christ and things that I'm very familiar with, the Church of England does, but also they have these prayers and these rhythms that you build into your worship services. And it's like a daily, at Wycliffe Hall, we would have a chapel service once a week, but we'd also have daily like online gatherings for prayer and going through the daily Book of Common Prayer readings and things like that. So I really loved that. It's something that I've been kind of trying to include some more standard rhythms into my daily prayer life now that I'm back home. And I really appreciated their perspective. So yeah, I'd say, but then in general, the country of England is, I wouldn't say post-Christian. Maybe somebody would. I don't know all those different sociological terms really well, but in general, I don't think the country as a whole is as welcome and affirming and open to Christianity as it probably is in America. It just seems like there's fewer Christians there in general, is what I got the sense.
Yeah, and even the United States is pretty varied, and some places have become more secularized and maybe a little bit more like Europe than others. But yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you feel that very starkly there. And they have, as a culture, I mean, they have the Church of England, but I think it sounds like there's a lot of secularization there. But then they also have an influx of people from other countries, and you think of like the Muslim immigration, right? So that's all affected their spiritual landscape.
And they also have, it's not just the Church of England there. There were churches around town that were just non-denominational churches, Baptist churches, Catholic churches. There were a lot of different, different denominations and sort of things like that. But the Church of England is definitely probably the most prominent one throughout the country. And the history of that is really fascinating to read and go back, to the way that got started and things like that. So that's hundreds and hundreds of years. And even back to the King James Bible and things like that. It's all kind of in there together. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and maybe sometime we could do a video discussion exploring England a little bit more in depth as far as that history and talking about the Church of England, Catholicism. I mean, that ties not only into their spiritual landscape, but even their governmental landscape.
Absolutely.
And so there's so much there. And it's fascinating.
I know a couple people over there who would love to do that with you. That'd be a really interesting conversation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, the beauty of online interaction is we could pull in people from different places. Absolutely. As long as we work out the time zones, right?
That's right.
So you were talking there about being exposed to different aspects of Christianity. And was any of that really... Was any of it really stretching to you? Was there anything that you experienced that, and I'm sure not only in England, but even at Fuller, there might have been some things that have really caused you to think
about. Yeah. I found myself through my time at Fuller, probably more so than in England. England, I think it was being at Oxford. I was the new guy, and I was unfamiliar with the rhythms of the Church of England. So they kind of all had I would always say, am I doing the right thing? Like there was a couple times where I was asked to pray in chapel or things like that. And I was so nervous about getting it right because it felt so formal. And most of my classmates would say, you do whatever's comfortable for you. And that will be a blessing to us because we need to get away from the rigidness sometimes, the rigidity. But particularly at Fuller, I was, Fuller is kind of considered kind of a well-known evangelical place, but it's also very, very diverse. And there's a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different denominations. And so I've spent the last 5 years in kind of these educational environments where we're studying theology, we're studying the Bible, we're studying church history, but I'm doing so alongside people who are from very different backgrounds than me, who some of that is culturally different locations, different ethnicities, and different church backgrounds. And what I found is that the way that I see things is not the way that everybody else sees things. And that's okay. And that is stretching because sometimes people say something and my instinct is to say, no, that's wrong because the way I see it is this way. But oftentimes it's kind of somewhere in the middle that you find the most truth and the most beauty. And I've learned so much from not holding on really tightly to the way I see things being the right way, but recognizing that I'll give you an analogy, Tim. And I read this from this is kind of taken from a book that I read in seminary, a Cuban Methodist American pastor named Justo Gonzalez, who's done a lot of church history. And he talks about perspective. And it's like if you and I were on opposite sides of a beautiful valley on like the tops of some mountains, looking down on the valley, and we both decided this is so beautiful and breathtaking. I'm gonna paint a picture of it right up here. And we painted a beautiful picture of it. And there was a stream and there was trees and there was wildlife. And then we like met at a campsite the next day and we were telling one another the story about this valley and we pulled out our pictures. Well, your picture and my picture, even though they're of the same valley, they would not look the same. Because we've been looking at it from different perspectives, but also because we're going to have a different artistic style to how we express that and communicate that. But which one is the right picture? And I think my answer to that is there's not a right picture. They're both how we see this issue, how we see this valley. And that kind of shapes into theology and to how we read the Bible and to how we think about things. Certainly there are things that I think we need to come to agreement on that are essential for sure. I believe that. But there's also room for us to do life alongside people who have a different perspective than we do. And my sense has been the more I open myself up to that and I soften my heart to that, the more it's allowed me to grow deeper in my faith. It hasn't ripped things away and made me believe that I was just wrong about everything, but it's helped me consider other things more fully. And I just choose to operate that way now, being a little bit more open-minded and less I'm going to dig my heels in and I want to have thoughtful conversations with people. And it's really hard to do that these days because we're on the internet and we're all stuck at home and you just want to fire off your opinion on somebody's Facebook post. And I want to do that just as much as anybody else does. But I'm learning that, sometimes being slow to speak and slow to become angry and more open-minded to people and just listening to people who are different than me and who have different experiences than me has been really fruitful in my life and my faith.
I agree. And I think a lot of the disagreements we have is just because of lack of exposure and experience to things. And, we don't realize we're growing up in a certain context and how that influences us. I think in America too, we forget we have our own issues and own things we're trying to grapple with. When you meet Christians from other countries, and just begin to interact with them, you get to see both sides of what you were talking about, that, there are things people see differently. And we're really wrapped up a lot in politics in America.
It was really interesting to live in England during the election cycle, the heart of it last fall. And every day people were asking me and my wife questions about this, and particularly that week of the election, when there was so many question marks, people were like, "Are you guys okay?" We're like, yeah, we're fine. It's going to be okay. We don't know what's going to happen. And that's not to say for one side or the other. People are just like, it seems like America's like blowing up right now, you know? Yeah.
Well, I will say that's actually kind of a trait of our culture. We might be a little bit more comfortable with as Americans is volatility.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of built a little bit more into our fabric. And, you know, at our most stable, we still don't always get along very well.
Exactly. Yeah. I have people who, particularly in the last year of COVID, I've just people that I know and love that I've known for a long time. And I've seen them say things on the internet that I'm like, man, I would not have expected them to have that feeling about that. And different perspectives on different things, not necessarily all bad or all good. Just like, oh, I didn't expect that person to think that way about that. And I think often we don't have a healthy way of communicating about it. And then social media has kind of exacerbated the ability to like share opinions without really having dialogue. And most of these conversations require a lot of more nuanced, thoughtful dialogue. And some people have asked me that about a couple of different issues on Bible Review Blog and Bible publishing. And I've just said, I don't think this is an appropriate place to have in the comments of an Instagram post. Is not an appropriate place to have, like somebody asked me about my tattoos because I have full sleeve tattoos. And I was like, we really can't have a great conversation about this in the comments of my Instagram post, but I'd be happy to chat with you offline about it. That's what I said to somebody. But I think that person really just wanted to say, well, Leviticus says you shouldn't have that, so you're a sinner, you know, like they just wanted to drop that comment and move on, you know. Yeah. But I really do appreciate, Tim, the way a lot of your videos, you tackle some tough topics, some divisive topics, but every time I watch, you are balanced, you are fair, you share your opinion, but you do so in a way that is humble and respectful of other people. And I think if we all operated that way a little bit more in how we engage with others online, it would be a lot healthier environment for all of us.
I appreciate that. And that is a desire of mine is to aid in the good, helpful, edifying discussion of things. I will say people sometimes will comment, you know, you seem calm about these issues. Yeah. And how do you have that calmness? For me, it's been a learned skill. I don't think any of us find it easy to work through disagreements. I had two older brothers growing up, and, you know, if you can believe it, we fought at, you know, points at, you know, so yeah. I've had plenty of disagreements in my life. And I think that one of the reasons we don't deal with things that we have differences of opinion on is because it is uncomfortable. And when you start a discussion, you may feel that, you know, and it's really hard. I can understand. So because it's uncomfortable to be in a place where you're being stretched or challenged, we like the safety of going to those places where we hear what we want to hear.
Absolutely.
But the problem with that, we see it with the news and social media. I'm only going to listen to this news. I'm only going to listen to this. And then everybody gets into their own bubbles.
A little silo of only seeing what you see. Yeah.
It reinforces those divisions and makes it even harder to have discussions. So I'm trying to create a venue, but one of the challenges from a YouTube perspective, though, is the algorithm wants to categorize people. It needs to know where do they fit. Yeah. So it is hard. You know, I find that it's challenging to build an audience because, you know, who wants to listen to both sides?
In any situation, I think whether it's politics, theology, there's so many different things where it's like it's actually easier to be one extreme or the other. It's easier to be loud on one extreme or the other. But what I continue to find is that it's kind of in that murky area in between that I find a lot of really good truth and insight that I want to wrestle with. And you have to kind of turn the volume down and kind of wade into that. It's not as easy to be there. And some of my best conversations in seminary and fruitful conversations with friends in life have been like I have for the past several years. I have two really close friends. One is a Democrat. He's a Christian, loves the Lord. He's a Democrat. He's a liberal person. Another is a Republican, and they're both kind of on the extremes. And I have really enjoyed sitting down over coffee or lunch with those two guys and talking about politics and talking about America, and then sometimes talking about faith and theology and how all of those things intermingle. And that's in a really safe place for the three of us to dig into that together, because we love one another, and we're not just having this conversation on our Facebook pages. We're doing it real time life together. And that's really good. And I think that's what your channel reminds me of. It's like kind of meeting in that middle, and we're going to dig into this a little bit in a thoughtful way. And man, you're right. The algorithm probably doesn't like that, but it's definitely a better place to be.
It doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know who to recommend my channel to. And, so it's interesting, but and kind of a great wrap up point for all this is I was going to say too, that, when you go to other countries and you're exposed to, and we need to be exposed to new things. I really believe that it will help us to grow, but you'll also see your points of unity. You'll see what the essentials are. Isn't it amazing? You can go to any country, and when you meet a brother or sister in Christ, that unity that we have, that shared belief that we have, it is a family, a spiritual family dynamic.
Absolutely. I think that's what I've learned from my travels, from reviewing Bibles, my experience as a student and a pastor and a musician, is that there is so much, there's so much we can just kind of get scattered about, but we have this unifying point in who Jesus is and what he's done for us and God's love for us. And you're right. It's just like, it's this kindred spirit that we have with others. And it is something that I want to help other people find, like the concept of doing Bible reviews is not just because I want to review a bunch of Bibles. It's because I believe the Bible is an access point to the truth of who Jesus is and what he's done for us. And that, I want to help people find a Bible that they're going to want to pick up and want to read. And when we do that, we get to those essential things. I mean, man, if we all spend as much time studying God's word and praying and spending time with Jesus as we did scrolling through our phones, I think that we would tap into something really beautiful. And I think that's something the world desperately needs right now, is just for people who know and love Jesus to really take that seriously and to really focus on what it looks like to be salt and light in the earth today.
Well, this has been so encouraging and edifying for me, and I'm sure for people watching, it's going to be a great thing for them to be able to hear what we're talking about. So thank you so much for joining me on my channel. I will leave links to your YouTube channel, your blog, and you also have music as well, I think, right?
Yeah, I've got some music. You can search my name on Spotify and iTunes and all that stuff. You can find my music, and then if you search Tim and Becca Wildsmith, we did a little hymns album. So there's some acoustic hymns that we've done, but all that stuff's on my YouTube channel as well. That's
great. Well, thank you so much. And I hope that we can do this again sometime. That would be great.
I would love that. Thanks for having me, Tim. Thanks for all your watchers. Thanks for watching us today.
God bless you.